quick housekeeping things. We have a few folks joining us today, so we do ask that you keep yourself on mute and off video unless you're presenting, but we will have opportunities to engage with our speakers. So at the end, we should have about 20 minutes for discussion Q&A. So please do hold your questions, though if you'd like to write them into the chat, you're welcome to do that. And that way, if you don't forget in the moment, you can stick them there and we'll get to them at the end. And we'll also have an opportunity just to do unmute and chat more informally at the end as well. So with all of that as intro, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Tony Willardson, who's the director of the Western States Water Council, to get us started. And Tony, you are on mute. I can't unmute you there. There you go.
Am I unmuted
You're
now?
You're good. Thank you.
Just a couple of introductory slides about the council. Ryan, if you can advance those. The Western States Water Council was created in 1965 by the governors, and we are a government entity. We have 18 participating states, so all of the 17 reclamation states.
Oh,
and
sorry,
the
Tony. Ryan, we can see your screen. Sorry, just to intervene there. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Ryan, if you can advance. There we go. So 18 states, the 17 reclamation states, and the state of Alaska. Our members are appointed by and serve at the pleasure of their respective governors. We provide a collective voice on water policy issues and also foster cooperation among our federal and state partnerships. We work closely with the Western Governors Association, and obviously we welcome the participation of WestFAST team members, which was created about 2009-2010, WestFAST, at the request of the governors. The next slide, we have a very broad mission. Ryan, if you can advance, yes, to ensure that the West has an adequate supply of water of suitable quality to meet its diverse economic and environmental needs now and in the future. So no small task. Actually, working with WGA in 2009, we found that there was no central location for state water information. And so with some support from the Department of Energy through WGA, we began development of what we call our water data exchange. Ryan will talk a bit about that. But we have information from all of our 18 states and many of the different agencies, both water rights, water use information. We'll talk about that a little bit. But what we found was without a tool to be able to visualize that on the front end, a lot of that information was not as useful as it might be. So we began working with philanthropic partners and with the Bureau of Reclamation under a WaterSmart grant to develop what we've called our Western States Water Data Access and Analysis Tool, or WestDAAT. And as part of the deliverables then for this WaterSmart grant was the development and launch of a beta version, importing place of use data related to water rights for as many states as have that data. And then also coordinating with reclamation staff and on their water rights project. And you'll hear more about that from Darion, Mayhorn, and others a little bit later. We've also been coordinating with our state and other federal agencies and our IT contractors as far as development of the tool, as well as the Internet of Water, for those of you that may be familiar with that, and the U.S. Geological Survey. So all of our data is also geo-referenced with persistent identifiers. So if we have a point of diversion, you would be able to find that across a GeoConnect system that's supported by USGS, as well as we're connected with a network link data indexing project. And Ryan will mention that. So we developed a number of use cases for the tool and outreach to different personas or user groups, which Ryan will also mention. And actually, our final dashboard was launched in the spring of 2023, ahead of schedule because of some of the support that we had from philanthropic groups and others that we'll mention. So this webinar is actually part of the completion of our deliverables for that WaterSmart grant, and we'll be completing a final report. And with that, Ryan, I'll let you talk about WestDAAT.
All right, double checking if everyone can hear me.
You're good.
Great. All right, I will take over from there. My name is Ryan James. I am the data analysis for the Western States Water Council, and I will talk about how the Western States Water Data Access and Analysis Tool, or WSDAAT tool, can be used. WSDAAT is the front-end mapping data exploratory web tool for the Water Data and Exchange Program, or WADE for short. WADE has been around since 2011 and is part of the council and is committed to assisting member states in publicly sharing in a standardized format cross-regional water information to better help inform water resource planning and policy creation. WSDAAT is the leader on water allocation right information throughout the Western United States. Through WestDAAT, we currently showcase about 2 million water rights spread out across 2.5 million sites. That's a many-to-many relationship. Through the entire system, we house about 35 different data sets across 23 different state agencies between our 18-member Western States Council member states. WSDAAT and WADE follow the FAIR guidance principles for statistic data management and stewardship, where we provide all of our water information that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and as a reuse for every digital asset. How the WADE and WSDAAT works is we take the publicly available water information with permission from the state's own services, format it to fit the WADE data cloud architecture and schema, and upload that information into the cloud database. From there, that information is accessible through WSDAAT, our front-end application, or it is available through our API retrieval services on a larger scale retrieval. Anything we do is documented and sourced on our WADE GitHub repository. This includes the copies of the source file and where that information came from, in addition to contact information for the agencies, details on how we standardize it into our cloud schema, and the processed information, essentially, and analytics showcasing our own findings on the water information. WADE is integrated with GeoConnects, the system for connecting water data from different data providers via geographic locations, along with the Hydro Network Linked Index Project, or NLDI, which is a system that provides a search service for any index data catchment along a given river basin. Through these interactions, WestDAAT is capable of indexing and finding all water right information through WADE, through stream gauge information through the USGS, and water quality information, EPA, all along the same service, even though the information is stored on different cloud architecture and databases and agencies. WestDAAT was built to fit the needs of a variety of users. Particularly, we built personas for 7 different use cases. These range from high-level authority positions to more public individuals. These personas were based on real-world discussions and agencies we had, based on their own data and their own data names. For traffic, we have about a active 50 users per week with a couple large active use case on a specific key elements, particularly the public release webinar in May 14 and a couple blog posts back in August of 2023. Most of our users, thankfully, are located here in the United States, particularly the Western state member states here in the West, but we do have an interest in the East on seeing what we're doing with the data. As a quick demo on how WSDAAT can be used, I'm going to do a quick demo on identifying major Bureau of Reclamation identified water rights near the Starvation Reservoir in Utah. Here is a screenshot on how that works, where I simply select the owner type to be the Bureau of Reclamation. And for all major water rights, I considered anything with a priority date similar to the Colorado impact of 1922. So I arbitrarily picked a date of January 1st, 1923. Here we can see a few hits on that specific element. From there, we can just pick one out of interest. I picked that one arbitrary at the end there as an agricultural use. From there, we also have landing page information. This is the Wade reflected information in our own system, looking at this Bureau of Reclamation water right with a priority of 1914 and a flow of 41 CFS. But as I said, we house information from this date, so we also provide the quick link back to where the water right information. This is for validation efforts and to showcase where the data is coming from. Here is the Utah's own landing page of that water right, showcasing it is a Bureau of Reclamation right in that area of a priority date in 1914. A quick use case on the NLDI tool of how this works, I picked a area just below that starvation reservoir, drag and drop our pin with our existing filters of 1923 and all Bureau rights. Here we can see all of the still Bureau rights, but we also see all of the EPA water quality sites in that given river basin. I arbitrarily picked a starvation reservoir water quality site there, and from there in the NLDI, we could track down the water quality information in that area as well. All this information is available and downloadable through WestDAAT or through our API retrieval service. In a reclamation-related element, each state is their own island on how they identify water rights. In this case, Bureau of Reclamation can come in a variety of formats. Specifically here for Wade and WestDAAT, we do a keyword search based on repeated use terms, different ways to spell or identify the Bureau of Reclamation within their own paper water rights. Through that information, we are able to simplify that on our cross-regional analysis and just label it with the one identifier. Just a quick note on limitations on that approach. Unfortunately, not all paper water right information is 100% put together. There are cases of where the water right information does not track owner information. Not to throw Colorado under the bus, but more just give an example of Colorado does not track Colorado River Basin. That doesn't mean there aren't Bureau projects in Colorado. It's just it can be a little hard to find because they don't post the owner information on their own paper rights. So far, we've identified 254 Bureau-specific reclamation water rights throughout the West. In a similar effort, we also identified 1,188 reclamation contractors. These are projects contracted out by the Bureau of Reclamation. This was done by doing a web scraping project. By scraping 65, result-wise, we found 65 unique water right contractors that match the state's own records within Wade. In addition, we found another 9 additional contract names in a reclamation dam project. That information particularly can be summarized. We have created a tableau there that summarizes that reclamation owner and reclamation contractor information. And it can obviously be found through our WestDAAT information through the WestDAAT download or the API retrieval service. So what's next for WestDAAT and Wade? We are moving beyond just looking at water allocation data. We're also looking at including what we call the non-federal Western states use and supply time series information. This is water use information given through a lot of formats, specifically water use information tied through water rights, here shown in yellow. This is in addition to state-sponsored reservoir and dam flow information, water quality information gauge sites, stream gauge information, tying this all from the state-sponsored side of that. So these are not from federal sources. These are what the states themselves are releasing in these elements, and these are time-sensitive elements that we're going to get in Wade and show alongside with the water right information. In addition, we're looking at adding what we call overlay information. Overlay information is the rules and governing elements in those areas that we break down into either a regulatory or administration area. Those are specifically looking at regulatory and administration of groundwater and surface water rules and regulations in an area. How that will work is that we'll be able to overlay what information and rules are tied to existing water rights based on looking at a given regulatory area. In addition to that, we are incorporating what was known as the Western Water Conservation and Application Tool, or WSCAT. WSCAT is an extension of the WestDAAT tool for streamlining the application process for in-state temporary water conservation measures. These are accomplished by integrating water data from WADE and WestDAAT and combining that with the OpenET measures of evapotranspiration consumptive use estimates. OpenET provides a user-friendly satellite imagery that can computationally estimate the total amount of water evapotranspiration through vegetation or to the atmosphere. That will be a tool that we are developing, and hopefully with a launch of that sometime in mid to late 2025. Just a quick thank you here, as WestCAT and WADE is funded, and we could not have done this work without our funders and partners. And just a quick thank you for me and Tony.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Tony and Ryan. With that, I'm going to transition it over to reclamation, and I think we'll go to Darion Mayhorn first, who is the supervisor over the operations and maintenance branch in the asset management division in Denver for reclamation. So thank you, Darion. Oh, we're not hearing you, Darion. I'm guessing he's switching to computer audio. I'm in the same building and we do have issues with audio in our conference rooms, unfortunately.
Can you hear me okay now?
We can hear you. Can't see you anymore, but we can hear you.
Oh, no.
Oh, there you are. Perfect.
Okay, there we go. So technology, right? We adapt, we make it all work. All right, so thanks for being patient with us here. So like Madeline said, Darion Mayhorn, supervisory civil engineer within Dam Safety and Infrastructure's asset management division. So I have the great pleasure of supervising the operation and maintenance branch. It's full of incredibly talented folks. I've got some of them in the room with me right now. We've got some interns for the summer. But then particularly the big kudos for this work and this project go out to Ginger Dill, who's on, as well as Jesus Hernandez, who will be presenting with us today. Ginger did a lot of the heavy work in receiving what we call a science and technology project for this. And then Jesus was kind of the main developer. He originally was in our Upper Colorado Basin region out in Salt Lake, and we stole him and got him to move out to Denver. So yeah, I think that both Tony and Ryan did a great job of really teeing it off in the project, and especially from the Western States Water Council's perspective and just the collaboration we've had. We've been, I think, incredibly grateful for the collaboration, both our ability to provide funding, right, through WaterSmart and it be well leveraged and well used as the Water Council has done. But then what's somewhat unique is that reclamation within in real time be working with someone that has benefited from one of our grants to say, hey, we're doing a very similar thing, and we need to leverage what you're doing in real time and work together. So I think it was really impressive how we've done this and how we've worked together. So Jesus, if you could go to the next slide. So we'll have a little background about reclamation and water rights, and then particularly the science and technology project that I mentioned that we were selected for internally. And then Jesus will take it from there, and he'll talk about all of the technical things that go beyond my capacity, and particularly our coordination and our integration with the data from WAVE. And so, yeah, next slide. So a little bit about reclamation. I don't think that really the people on this call necessarily need background on reclamation, but we'll give it regardless of reclamation. We are a Federal Water Resources Agency, right, established under the Department of the Interior, established in 1902. And simply put, we deliver water and power across the West, right? We operate in what we could call the 17 Western states. So I always say that's the Dakotas down to Texas and on to the West, to give folks a sense of our geographic area. We are somewhat unique in that we only operate in the West. And so we have a big portion of what we would call kind of our headquarters staff that sit within Denver, here in Lakewood, Colorado, myself included, right? Dam safety and infrastructure, asset management. We're part of what we call the commissioner's office. And then reclamation has 5 regions. They follow the boundaries of the Department of the Interior regions. And then within those regions, we have area offices and field offices that directly manage reclamation's projects. Well, actually, the next slide might get to this some, but the thing to know about that slide is we've got five regions, 5 distinct regions. I'll say that. So as we transition to the next slide, the reason why that matters is because our regions, in some cases, can operate very autonomously, very uniquely, and so any time that we get an enterprise solution for something at reclamation, that's a big to do. That's a really big deal. And I know the folks that work for reclamation on the call are kind of nodding their heads like, yeah, that's a big deal. And so anyway, since the 1980s, there's been this vision of having a single source shared water rights database within reclamation. And there were 5 different databases that kind of attempted this. There's lots of different memos where they start to collect the data, then it stop. Much like a lot of things happen, right? The priority shift, and one thing might be a priority, and then next thing you know, it shifts again. So next slide. One thing that we've been working a lot to do within Dam Safety and Infrastructure Asset Management Division is do a better job of understanding what we own and where it's located. So we've been doing a great deal of work to just better characterize and catalog our assets and have an inventory of those assets. We call that our Enterprise Asset Registry Project. We've got over 20 or so asset classes where we've worked to standardize the data across our assets, whether that be our dams, our levees, our conveyance features, bridges, roads, whatever it might be, and say, here are the kind of data dictionary, right? Here are the definitions that we're using for these fields, and have consistency across our agency. It's leveraged through GIS, and it's something that everyone in the agency has access to in real time. That's a really big deal, again, for reclamation, because we tend to do things and operate very autonomously within our regions. And so through that effort of really coalescing, having a single shared source of our assets, I would argue that probably one of our most important assets, even though we don't characterize them all the time as assets, is our water rights, right? And working with our transfer works partners, right, to deliver water across the West. And so a big purpose function of this, what we call the Water Rights Information Management System, was to develop and improve the accessibility and usability of this data as it relates to water rights across our regional area and program offices, and include the various different functions that we have within those offices into that system. Next slide. I mentioned the Science and Technology Project. So reclamation, another one of those kind of headquarter office, commissioner office functions is research and development. And the research and development has the Science and Technology Program, which really drives reclamation's internal kind of research, if you will. And it allows us, I think, to really think creatively, right, about some of the different problems that might exist in our work and our workflows, materials we use, whatever it might be, and what are some of these kind of research questions that we have that we need to answer, that we want to take a project to the next step, but maybe within the program we don't have the viability to do that. The Science and Technology program has been great for that, and so Ginger Dill put in a proposal for this project, and we got selected, we got funding, and that was kind of the seed funding, if you will, for RIMS. So what was the problem? The problem is that regional area offices dedicate substantial time to managing, maintaining, and protecting our water rights, and in many cases using disparate systems to be able to do so, right? And so what this proposal did was say, okay, instead of all of these Excel spreadsheets and Access databases and perhaps things just written down in a Word document, who knows what it might be, that there was a lot of value and utility in us having enterprise and information management system for our water rights, and having it, again, centralized in one location and having it available in real time for everyone in the agency to access it. And so with that, I will pass it off to Jesus to share more about the project.
Thanks, Darion. Yeah, really good job on that initial outline. So once we began our work with WADE back in 2021, they gave us a really nice presentation of what they were working on, and immediately we were able to see that there was a lot of good architecture and code that was there that we would have had to initially create and develop. So kind of thinking in that mindset, when we saw what Western states had done with the WestDAAT tool and with the WADE program, being able to access the water rights, supply data, and one of the really nice features that was shown just a little bit earlier ago by Ryan was being able to access the originating data source. So going back over to the state engineer's site and being able to trace back to the original document that the water right was coming from. One of the oldest water rights that we have in reclamation is in 1898 timeframe, and being able to see the original document, scanned in and digitized right there, and being able to access that in a few clicks was really impressive. But with that, from that initial meeting, we were able to go forward and start to actually see what was being collected over on the WADE side. And again, Brian had shown a really nice preview of the way that the states were classifying reclamation with all of those different terms for the names. We were USVR, we were DOI USVR, and all of those different things. It was impressive to see them collate all of those records together, and with that initial run of over 1,000 records that were associated just with reclamation, and then being able to tie that back over to the originating data source, that was super awesome. And that just initially that led to that funding through the Water Smart Grant program to continue that collaboration. So after the demo and the pilot and a couple more meetings, we were able to then get into their data schema, and taking a look at that. It was really nice for reclamation to have kind of a guide going forward. It wasn't us having to create an entirely new solution, which often happens in government enterprise system. We start at the very beginning rather than trying to see what other people have done, or adopting a system and modifying it to meet our needs. We go to the very beginning and then try to go forward, which just increases the time and cost of the development phase. So when Reclamation was looking at the WADE schema and the architecture, it just was starting to click that this may be a potential solution that we could adapt into our process that would enable us to, again, access a lot of the state engineer sites, and not have to develop the code where it's data scraping just very specific records. WADE was gathering, all of those 35 million worth of water rights and indexing it properly for us to just go into their system and find our stuff out. The other nice feature too was the integrated geospatial interface that was there. Darion had mentioned our asset registry and its components within the geospatial data realm and the interfaces there, which are all internal. It was nice to have an external geospatial interface that was not necessarily connected to reclamation. And why that was nice is that oftentimes there's a lot of security stuff that is involved, and being able to access a third-party system was just nice. With that, one of the next ways that we were looking at fully adopting the WAIT solution into the RIMS application was utilizing their API system. So again, Ryan had mentioned how they were publishing all of that data and it was accessible to the public. So anyone can go over to their system, do the query, and download the data. With that, that was one of those green lights of where we don't need to, again, develop any of these custom data adapters to the state engineer sites. We could just connect to one location and gather the information. And we do that exactly. We have a data adapter that queries the WAIT API, and it saves the data into one of our internal SQL servers. And with that, we'll always have the most up-to-date information for our water rights that are indexed in the RIMS system. So again, RIMS uses just that single API to get the state engineer's water rights data. And through this process, we're removing a lot of the redundancy and standardizing the process that reclamation would be able to update and curate its water rights inventory. To that extent, though, there was always kind of that hesitation within reclamation on where is this data coming from. So even at the beginning of the project, it was like, how are the people out in the field or the people that are responsible doing the water administration for the water rights, how are they going to be able to modify the data? And if we were ingesting an external data source, was it going to overwrite it? So we were able to set up processes where, as we're ingesting the data, it's not going to overwrite things that reclamation employees had inputted in. Instead, it would kind of have a dual state where we have the reclamation side of the water right, and then we just have what the state is showing. And so to that, we have our subject matter experts that are working in our system to validate and create that initial inventory. And then over time, as we get or identify more water rights that may be associated with us, the SMEs are able to go into the WestDAAT tool and do their water right fact checking into that system and then through the state engineer site. So SMEs are utilizing the tool that Western States has, and then hopefully they will just continue to update the data. So quick overview of how reclamation actually does a lot of its data ingestion from external sites. This is kind of a simple graphic where on the left side you see these data sources. These could be our GIS system. It could be WestDAAT. We just take all of that data and we have processes internal that essentially do crosswalks, and it indexes the proper linkage between the records. And then we have just one common data set that we're able to use for the RIMS tool. So we're able to collect all of these big data sets and turn that data into actionable insights, whether that's through Power BI, which is one of our big data intelligence tools to view the data in ways, or just through a simple paginated report that shows the water totals. All of those are kind of combined into a single application that we created with called RIMS. So finally, when we're looking at what could RIMS provide in an internal solution versus what WestDAAT could do, these were the top 6 requirements that we had, and WestDAAT was able to fulfill all of them except for file and store the related documents, which is more of an internal process where we may have documents, and we would need to be able to create a data adapter to our own internal file repository. But outside of that, everything else checked the list of the requirements. So when we were looking at developing our RIMS tool, it was really, what do we not need to do versus what can we just leverage from the WestDAAT side of the side. And one of those big things was the geospatial side, and then being able to really drill down into the water rights history. So we finally developed the RIMS tool. This is a snapshot of what it looks like. This is the center screen. It's very basic, and when we were developing it, we shifted away from having to have just a geospatial side of it, and we could instead focus more on tabular data. A lot of the ways that we saw reclamation employees researching or doing their work was in tabular formatting and not necessarily geospatial. So the geospatial side is nice, but what they really want to be able to do is just find things very quickly based off of the way that they've curated their records within the system. So again, very simple, few graphics there. But one of the big points of this was being able to integrate the WestDAAT tool into our system. And because of their kind of public setup where you could navigate to any part of their site through their API, we were able to incorporate a link within the system that would directly take the user over into the WestDAAT tool and show that diversion or storage or whatever it was on a mapping system. Second, we were able to actually integrate the WestDAAT tool into our custom application. So this is just a separate tab that when the user goes over, it's automatically filtered to the Bureau of Reclamation data set that they have linked or indexed for us. And they can then just go to whatever state that they want to or do whatever kind of research they have within the system. So instead of having multiple links on multiple interfaces, this is just consolidating it into one easy researching tool. And then again, one of those big highlights was being able to drill down in the information. So, clicking a point on the map, you would be able to pull up the state engineer site page, view that document, and then go into its file. So super awesome things. And this was the vision of the initial RIMS system. And really, the WestDAAT tool is helpful in consolidating a lot of these things that we were going to have to build from scratch. And instead, we were able to leverage it and save time, resources on the development of this and get straight into data ingestion. So with that, with the implementation of RIMS, with the integration of the WestDAAT tool, and then being able to gather the data from its API, we've been able to identify so far 1,491 records, or that have been validated by our SMEs in the regions. That's about 1,121 versions and 394 water users and about 1,300 sites and water sources for that. Again, one of the nice things too with this is that we were able to now connect this information, our sites and sources, to our asset registry. So we can begin to create kind of a flow chart of where the water is beginning to go, where were the diversions at, and start mapping it out like that. However, looking forward into what WestDAAT is doing with a lot of their updates, we may not even have to do that. So this is awesome to have heard their presentation about what they're going to do in the future. Because we would like to continue that partnership and continue to have the WADE program help support reclamation behind the scenes, curating a lot of our water rights information. Some of the things that we'd like to continue to do forward would be advancing more reporting features. And it was nice to see that Ryan had presented a custom Tableau report right there. And that's, some things that we would definitely would like to see into the future. And then going with developing more custom views that reclamation can access that may be beneficial for us, that we can't necessarily do on our internal system, but could leverage the WestDAAT tool to help see some of those graphics. And then again, one of the big things is getting this information crosswalked over into our geospatial internal system. That would just be nice so that we have a internal representation in generating our own map. So that is everything that I have. Any comments or questions, you can direct them to me or Darion.
Thank you, Jesus, and thank you, Darion. Yeah, so we will just open it up to questions broadly, and I did see a little bit of chatter in our chat already. Want to acknowledge verbally too that we had Otto who's here in the room, in the virtual room. So Otto, I don't know, Tony put it in the chat better than I would, but Otto was instrumental in this effort, and he's already missed. So, oh, Tony, we cannot hear you. I'm not sure why. Oh. Well, hopefully we figure that out. Yeah, so if people have questions, whether that's for the Western States Water Council side or for reclamation, feel free to just raise a hand and we can call on folks, or if you'd prefer to use the chat, that's also fine too, and I can read out your question. Don't be shy. No. Well, I guess I can ask my own question in the interim. I guess, there may well be folks on this call from other federal agencies who are looking at what reclamation has done. Any advice, Jesus, Darion, Ginger, or from Ryan or Tony on things to think about, or lessons learned that folks can take with them if they want to take advantage of this data?
I can maybe start, and then I think let maybe Jesus add to it if he has anything to add. I mean, I think something, I don't know. We tend to sometimes think that the needs that we have are so unique, right? And seldomly are they that unique that we can't leverage what someone else has already developed, right? And so I think that's something that we quickly learned with the great work that was already being done through the Western States Water Council with this project, and that we could just leverage a ton of their work, connect it with maybe the needs that we had, the functions that we had, but just not find ourselves trying to create the wheel in a way that we don't need to. So I guess that's maybe just the one thing that I would offer, and just general with this and with other things is always like, who's already maybe done this? Who's already had this come up, and how do I build off of that rather than starting from scratch? So, Jesus, I don't know if you've got anything else to add.
No, I think that was great. Yeah, look at the reusability of people's work. And again, with the WestDAAT tool being publicly available and all the source code is out there available, when you're looking at some of these projects, it may be best to adopt a solution rather than try to do your own.
Oh, we still
Tony,
can't
we
hear
can't
you,
hear
Tony.
you. I'm sure that you've got wise words of wisdom. Tony always does. I've had the pleasure of working with Tony for, I don't even know how many years now, back when I was even over in WaterSmart. Tony, we need to hear what you've got to say. You've got good things to say.
You want to put him in the chat, maybe?
Yeah, he's gonna have to type it.
And I'll just say from the end of WestDAAT as a lesson learned that a lot of the council's success on this was taking the existing data already sponsored by the states themselves and putting it into a format that did not disrupt their own systems or processes. This is still the state water data for their own internal purposes, but we're extending that purpose to do a regional analysis now where they themselves don't have to worry about completing that regional analysis. They just need to make that information shareable and fair for other entities who wish to take it a step further and who could really benefit from using their data.
Thank you. Good answers. Other questions that people have? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mike Everly. I'm the National Water Rights and Uses Program Manager for the U.S. Forest Service. I really that slide that I saw that had the different permutations of the Bureau of Reclamation's name and the title and how the different states have it in their data really resonated with me. The Forest Service is very similar, and I'm trying to recall. So, what process? I guess who went through the process? Was it? Where was the process gone through? Maybe that's the best way to ask it. And then how was that resolved? Because we're trying to figure out, the Forest Service is trying to figure out how to get a better handle on it, because we can't even work with one state's agencies because of the variation. So we really appreciate any lessons learned that you guys had.
Sure, I think you're talking about this
Yes.
identifying reclamation rights. So for the council's own project, the easiest solution we ended up identifying was just doing a hand review of the data and looking at all of the unique ways that this type of owner could be represented in the data. And then from there, it was just a simple keyword search of saving that in some kind of format and then applying it. We did actually explore and almost implement a natural language processing element using some supervised learning elements to predict when to categorize something. However, we found that the feature engineering on that was too abnormal because all of the elements kept coming in at bizarre and not labeling them correctly. For example, BOR, the unique ways that specifically for a language processing on an owner type can be done was a little not congruent. So, an example here was we couldn't get the BOR and USBR elements to match as a reclamation element in our supervised learning. So in the end, we just decided we'll just do a simpler process of doing a text-based search. We apply that same approach to identifying all owner types. I'll say these are WADE identified owner types too, mostly for simplifying the ability to search and view that information on WestDAAT. We do that with a variety of elements, including water source and beneficial use. We don't present it here, but we do try to we preserve the state data. So for example, we've identified 422 different beneficial uses identified here in the Western states. But in the end, we've simplified that list ourselves down to only 22 beneficial uses for the simple use of just showing, hey, this is all an agricultural right, even though the states might call it something different. We've got that in our documentation, which I did not link here, but that is also a WADE approach to simplify the search without replacing the existing data.
Yeah, thank you very much. We've been thinking of actually working. Well, one of the steps is to work with the states individually and try to get our name to be a little more uniform with them. And that's I think the state would benefit from it as well as us, and then it would easily roll up to this system here. So we're just trying to figure out the best way to do it. So I appreciate your advice. Thank you.
Madeline, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Tony.
I've switched to my phone. I don't know what was going on with my laptop. But Michael, too, we've had some discussions with Stephen Bartell, and it was, Stephen is with the Department of Justice, and he was saying, oh my gosh, this is a mess, because all of these rights should be held in the name of the United States and then the agency as well, to make it much clearer. And you're aware that early on, as we were working with WADE, we looked at groundwater wells on Forest Service lands, and those uses. And even then, I think it was apparent that probably neither the state nor the Forest Service knew all of those wells and where they were and what their capacity was. And my recollection too is that the Forest Service at the time maybe had 4 hydrogeologists, which again makes it a real challenge to track some of this information. We've had discussions with BLM too,
right?
As how we could use our WADE database and water rights database to identify BLM water rights. And I should shout out to Madeline. Stephanie Granger's on the phone and or on the line with us. And we have been working with NASA and Reclamation in a new Water Smart proposal that's been accepted to actually take our water rights database and integrate it with OpenET data to come up with actual consumptive use on a particular piece of land, whether that's public or private. And we're in the process of writing the financial assistance agreement now with Reclamation.
That's exciting stuff, Tony. Yeah.
I should make that distinction. I make up all these acronyms, but WestDAAT is this proposal for a conservation application tool, or CAT. And DAT is our data analysis access and analysis tool.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. And Jesus, do you all have a quality assurance process that supports some of the, I guess maybe addresses or perhaps even goes beyond Mike Eberly's question about some of the naming mechanisms, but also just, if things are missing or anything like that?
Yeah, I think what I was super thankful for that WestDAAT actually provided that for us. So we didn't have to go back into our system to change the titles. We just had Bureau of Reclamation. But again, this is coming directly from the states, and we have the 17 states, each with their own name for our water rights, or individual field offices or people. So that would always be something that you would have to do kind of on that initial stage of getting the data. But again, with the WestDAAT tool, it does it automatically for us, so we don't have to worry about it. But we have the same internal problems within our own systems right now too, with even our assets between the different levels of our enterprise systems and the way that they characterize or catalog asset information. We have sometimes multiple names, and right now we're in the throes of that entire process and trying to standardize the names across all of our systems. But yeah, no, I think it's nice to hear that there are other agencies that are having similar problems when it comes to data standardization, and there's no easy way to do it right now. It's hard work. It's what Ryan had kind of said. It's line by line, having to go through everything and just manually investigate it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, at least people know what they're getting into then. Other questions out there? Yep, go ahead, Melissa.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Melissa Norris. I work for the BLM. I'm a water rights specialist here at the state office in Billings, Montana. And I just had a question with regard to the data in the WADE kind of tool, if you will. Montana's going they're in an active adjudication, so records change, and the data, as I understand, is kind of available whenever the department sort of updates it online. So I was just wondering, how live is the data? Is it plugged kind of in a little more directly to it, or does it receive updates like quarterly or anything like that?
Sure. We update the data on there maybe on a biannual process. Everything on WADE and WestDAAT right now is considered static from their own states, agencies, and sources. There are long-term plans to try to get it as a overnight retrieval to update once a week. Unfortunately, every state is an island and they do their data in their own ways, particularly how they release that information to the public. Some of that is in a very good API retrieval service that is ready to go right now. Other that are two guys who are working with Fortran files and CSV files from the 1980s still, and they just haven't had the opportunity to make that readable data transition.
Sure. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Madeline, I mentioned too, I did put it in chat, but I wanted to point out that our WADE architecture was really designed by Dwayne Young with EPA. when he was on detail here in our offices in Salt Lake for a couple of years. And so that connection with WestFAST and that part of our collaboration started early in the development of these databases. And we've been lucky enough to have Dwayne go back to work at EPA and was able to help us as we work through some of our continuing interests, as well as work through some of the process where we did have some funding through APA's Exchange Network grants to initiate some of the work that we did.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Got a couple more minutes if anything else is lingering. Any other questions that we might have out there? All right. Well, hearing none, then I will wrap us up here. I just want to say thank you both to our reclamation folks and to the Western States Water Council. I appreciate all of you for joining. And as I mentioned at the offset here, we have recorded this event. So if you want to refer back to it, or if you want to share this with anybody, the link will be available later today on the Western States Water Council website on the WestFAST pages. So thank you, and hope to catch you at our next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Sure.